Hey, it's your boy, a tinge of cringe here, investigating your favorite TV shows, and today I am finally going to do a review on the latest 13 Reasons Why, Season 3. Uh, Here we go. Originally, I wasn't planning on watching Season 3 because Seasons 1 and 2 suck ass, and I don't want to continue watching it. But hey, everybody's saying that it sucks. So you know what? Let's talk about season 3. I spent 13 hours of my life watching this season. 13 hours just gone. It appears that 13 Reasons Why had outshot their pants and made an even worse season. You have to be joking, right? So 13 Reasons Why started off as a teen high school drama show about a girl named Hannah Baker who committed suicide and how there are so many people who caused it. The first season was actually not all that terrible, but season 2 is when the writers completely go off the source material and start spewing and spouting storylines that are uninteresting, unrealistic, either silly or just straight up boring. Not that I'm trying to recall a single storyline in season 2, I can't. And it's not that the writers of the show wrote this not out of a good idea. Making a dark, grim, edgy teen show which realistically depicts serious issues is not a bad idea at all. But in reality, the show is neither all that dark, or that realistic, or that serious, as a lot of the actual serious issues that teens are facing are seen through cartoony lens. Plus the bad acting, the cringy dialogue, the choppy editing, the plain cinematography, and the shitty pop music. This has been one of the worst TV shows of the past few years. So here we have season 3, which basically starts off 8 months after the last episode where Tyler almost brought his gun and shoot up a fucking school. Welcome to America. And everybody, including Clay and Tony, covered it up and pretended that nothing happened. But actually, this show is trying to do a bit of a Westworld here, because we have two timelines happening at the same time. One timeline happens immediately after the incident, and another timeline happens 8 months later when Bryce Walker suddenly got murdered. Yes, one of the main characters died, and that's supposed to be the premise of the season. I mean, I'm gonna be honest here. This premise of season 3 sounds like a friggin' Wattpad story. Anyways, we have episode 1. Yeah, I'm the new girl. That's the title of the episode. Which introduces a new girl by the name of Ani, who is easily one of the most annoying TV characters I've seen in a long time. She basically narrates the whole friggin' season, even though we don't know jack shit about her. And she always says things like, "Oh, I know all the secrets of everyone, the darkest, deepest secrets. And also, trust me, I know how to read people." So I guess she's some sort of a smartass detective now. And what's worse is how confusing the whole season is. It constantly jumps from the present day to the flashbacks, and then there are some flash forwards as well. I don't even know. And most of the scenes feel like they don't even have a purpose. And every time they jump from the present day to the flashbacks, the aspect ratio obnoxiously changes. And it's not that jumping back and forth in time don't work. I mean, just look at movies like Incendie, the prestige TV shows like Lost, and Westworld. I mean, they are littered with flashbacks and flash forwards, but they don't seem confusing at all. I mean, hopping back and forth in time only works if the story itself is interesting and every scene serves a damn purpose. Other than that, there are still a bunch of flaws in episode 1. The ridiculous number of stars on the police uniform, the terrible acting, it's even worse. The very plain and bland colors. I mean, I get that the show is trying to, make the atmosphere super depressing and grim, it's like very dark, but actually, it looks boring. It just looks boring. And the fact that all the teachers and parents are still either assholes or idiots, and the fact that they started the episode with a PSA, which is hilarious. Moving over to episode 2, if you're breathing, you're a liar. Edgy title, I know. And the episode itself is still confusing as fuck. I still have no idea why are everyone's faces busted and why are Zach's legs broken. I mean, actually, in the show, they later reveal why were his legs broken. But still, for the majority of the series, we have no idea what's going on, and we're not bothered to be interested in anything at all because it's all just a clusterfuck. The main conflict shown in this episode is basically Montgomery being pissed off about not being the captain of the football team. But why? It's not fair. I want to be the captain. And if you think these problems are what causes conflicts among high schoolers, you're probably under 15 years old. We also see scenes of Bryce in his new school where he gets bullied and laughed at, and I guess the writers kind of want its viewers to sympathize with Bryce. What? Bryce is he's a rapist, if I can recall correctly, and he deserved this. Like what am I supposed to do? Like sympathize with a rapist? Really? The dialogues are extremely awkward on this episode. I don't know what the hell happened. There are so much silence in between each line, and each line reads like a poorly translated Bible verse. The only good scene idea on this episode is the whole abortion thing, which is, I guess, somewhat emotional, even though incredibly forgettable. But come on, we've literally seen the same thing happening in Euphoria with a slightly more interesting character. This is just straight up lazy. Over to episode 3. The good person is indistinguishable from the bad. Goddamn these edgy titles. First of all, none of the storylines on this episode are interesting, as always, and also I've begun to notice a pattern, which is a bad thing. Basically, on every episode, we have a totally unrelated dumb storyline for the flashbacks and a suspect for Bryce's murder in the present day. On each episode. This time we have 2 suspects, technically. We have Justin and Jessica, and of course they're both innocent. For the flashback scenes, it's mostly Jessica complaining that she can't have good sex. Ani told her that she should try to masturbate, and she's like, whoa, I've had sex, but masturbating? I've never done that before. And later we have a bunch of scenes of her banging the hell out of Justin, trying on some kinky shit like it's 5 Shades of Grey. However goofy and jarring of a character change this is, I'm still kind of impressed that a character actually started to have development. And we also have episode 4, Angry, Young, and Man, where it doesn't really progress much. The suspect of the episode is Tyler, since it's revealed that Bryce was shot. So everybody thought it's Tyler now. And honestly, Tyler is probably the only character with a slight bit of dynamic, and the only character that I actually remotely care of. But still, needless to say, a majority of episode 4 is boring as hell. The flashback where Tyler spends his anger on a punching bag was actually kind of funny. The way characters interact are still super unrealistic, and a lot of the scenes are really friggin' predictable. We all know that there's going to be another fucking changing room fight, except what weirds me out in that scene is that there are windows in the changing room so that the coaches can look in? What? If there's one thing that I appreciate the writers for doing is that they also wrote a scene about how extremist liberals can go so far. I give props to whoever dared to write a scene like this in 2020, oh boy! And episode 5 is even worse. Probably because of the various awkward and uncomfortable and cringy sex scenes. But the main point isn't how cringy these sex scenes are, but it's the fact that these scenes don't really serve much of a purpose. So characters are just having sex for no reason. And they don't serve any purpose. Not to the characters, not to the story. It's just there for no good reason. I guess you could say that Montgomery is more of a fucked up person than he previously was in the show, but he just ends up feeling like a cartoony bad boy teenage villain. The scene where Clay and Ani followed Montgomery was freaking stupid and awfully executed, and it's actually kind of silly, and neither are the Alex scenes all that interesting. This show acts as if a great portion of teenagers are crime-loving, beer-gulping, pill-popping, sexual deviant scums, when in fact, yes, they do exist, but only a little bit, and no, it's not this over the top. Over to episode 6. You can tell the heart of a man by how he grieves, I think is the episode title. It's unnecessarily long. And on this episode, we get some more bullshit Bryce sympathy because it's Bryce's funeral, and in the middle of Bryce's mom's eulogy, we get a flashback of him and his mom splashing paint at each other for fun. Like, Bryce's mom was painting a room and suddenly Bryce just came in and they just started playing with wall paint. I don't get it. We also see a lot of flashbacks about how Tony's families got taken by the ICE and how his parents got deported and his family got separated. I'm glad the writers wrote about this to show how much it sucks to be a minority. It actually reminds me a lot of 21 Savage, which is really sad. But I guess I just wish that the storyline would connect with the overall story a little better. It just feels totally out of the main point. The only connection is that Bryce supplied money to Tony because he wanted to help, which is also kind of out of character. The scene at the end where Clay hugs his parents and said, "I love you," was very forced. It's like one of those cartoon episodes endings where the main protagonist finally understands a very important message about family and love. And I guess a few scenes here and there are goofy and sloppy, and I don't want to spend 12 hours just naming each one of them. Episode 7 is slightly better, I guess, because it tries to make Clay look like the suspect for killing Bryce, but actually, since we're in Clay's POV for most of the time, we don't really believe in that. But in turn, we learn some secrets about Ani that we previously didn't expect. But yeah, of course, another friggin' love triangle. As if we don't have enough love triangles in this show. Most of the scenes on this episode are still a total bore. That scene where Alex confronted Jesse in the library was sloppy and predictable. The character of Alex, I don't know if it's the writing being terrible or if it's the acting being terrible, but oh my gosh, Alex is just like... This is invasion of privacy.
This is like an invasion of privacy.
And in that scene, the background extras are having way more fun than the main cast. Another weird thing is that a hallucination of Bryce returned, like Hannah in season 2, which is very strange, unnecessary, and kind of dumb as well. Yep, that scene is pretty garbage, especially when Bryce said he would be reborn in a million men. In the bodies of a million men? Like what the hell does that even mean? I thought Bryce would say something like, "No matter what you do, I will always be in your head." Like, even though that sounds very cliche and trite, at least that makes sense. Like, what the hell does reborn in the bodies of a million men mean? Like, it just doesn't make any sense.
But I will be reborn in the bodies of a million men.
Anyways, I have another major issue with the dialogues in this episode, and that is whenever teens talk in this show and they're not pushing the plot forward, they're either talking about sex or some nerdy lore. Like whenever Clay and Ani are on screen and they're not talking about drama, they're talking about this dumb fictional thing like alien killer robots or something. This is the fakest fictional lore ever created for a story ever. Ani, you just ripped my favorite characters to shreds.
You just ripped my favorite character to shreds.
Then we have episode 8, which I guess is also slightly better, even though a majority of the scenes are pretty boring. Also, it's like the writers of the show suddenly remembered that Mr. Porter existed and just got him onto one episode and then be done with him. Just goodbye. The second last scene in the episode where Tyler revealed the truth about how Monty raped him was a decent scene, I guess. If the writing and the acting were better, it would have been a fantastic scene. It's emotional and it's memorable. At least it's supposed to be. And if only there are more scenes like this in the season, it would have been better. Slightly. Also, I give extra points to this episode for using Bauhaus's dark entries for the ending song. Episode 9 basically focuses on Justin, on how he's actually still doing drugs after all this time. The flashbacks aren't interesting at all. The dialogues are exceptionally terrible on this episode. There are just so many stutters and so many pointless lines. It's actually frustrating. Also, there are dialogues that are supposed to be very impactful and heavy, except they always have to end on a stupid note, like the time where Justin and Jessica revealed the truth about one another. Justin sort of revealing a tragic past of his own. And at the end, Justin says, well, I don't want to get my shit into your shit. And then Jessica said, no, but your shit is my shit. It reminds me of that really stupid, cringy brain fart dialogue. It just... Why does it always have to end on a very gross note? I have no idea. There are a few scenes that I find stupid as well, like that scene when Clay parkoured into a warehouse, and in the same scene when someone pulled out a gun and was about to shoot, Ani suddenly threw a bag at the gun and stopped it from firing. Or that scene when Clay was eating lunch all alone and suddenly Cyrus and the gang of emo punks showed up and sat beside him like, guys, remember those characters? They exist too. Ani is basically Miss Exposition on this episode and every other episode. She's narrating how a character feels and what they are thinking, even though she's supposedly speaking to a cop in a flash forward. And also, it seems like many of the actors in the show just don't have the ability to express emotions on their face themselves. Or actually, maybe it's just the writing. It's not even the actor's fault. And I am also going to mention the very odd spatial perception of the sets. The bedroom, the kitchen, and the living room are all in the same room. Very obviously, it's like the producers are not even making an effort to hide it. We also have the 10th episode, episode 10, which is the only episode where Hannah's mom made an appearance, and that's pretty much it. Everything else in this episode is just, the usuals. Episode 11 is also not that great, as expected. The scene where Jessica and her team suddenly crashed the football event was kind of fun, even though it makes no sense whatsoever. Why would all the football players, plus some random students in the school, suddenly decide to fight each other? No idea. But this scene sort of serves as an oasis in the middle of a sea of very predictable and drab scenes, I guess. A majority of the scenes in this season, and in this show as a whole, also feels inconsequential. Like, two characters would argue, and then 2 scenes later, they're totally fine. Someone would be crying, and 30 seconds later, they're chill. Episode 12 is probably the only episode that I actually personally enjoy, at least relatively more than other episodes. Even though a lot of this episode makes no sense, no chronological sense, not in terms of continuity, but it's still one of the more entertaining episodes, I have to admit myself. The fact that Clay wanted to disappear was kind of dumb. If he's so sure that he didn't kill Bryce, why couldn't he just stick to the truth? Why can't he just stop lying? I don't know. He's just such a moron. And I guess the show wants us to think he did kill Bryce, but then obviously when you consider how the season started, Clay wasn't set up to be the killer at all. It's really confusing though. If Clay found out Ani's love triangle secret during the homecoming game, why is he still so close to Ani in present day on episode 1? No idea. Then we have the Jessica's speech. The principal tried to get her to apologize on behalf of the student union to both schools for ruining the homecoming football game, which happened many months ago, but I guess the principal decided that now would be a good time for some reason. I feel like the speech was not as clever as it thought it was, but the part where the rape victims stand up for themselves was actually pretty inspiring, not gonna lie. We even get a little revelation twist. We also get 5 minutes of Bryce and his mom doing yoga, which was absolutely boring, but I kinda like how Zach decided to confess that he killed Bryce when in fact, if you've been paying attention and you've seen the flashbacks, you know that Zach didn't. But I guess I kind of like that the show is giving us a bit of a doubt. And of course, Monty was one of the lead suspects, so maybe he did it. This is probably the only moment in the entire season that actually felt like a murder mystery. Then we have the finale, episode 13, Let the Dead Bury the Dead. And this episode is quite special because it's not boring at all. In fact, it's actually quite eventful of an episode, but it still has tons of glaring problems. So first of all, the killer is finally revealed, and I do like the effort of writing a plot twist, but it really makes no sense. The decisions that the characters make, they make no sense. It's almost like they're written this way just to fulfill a plot point. It's almost like the writers are trying to give us shock value instead of actual character arcs. It's also kind of frustrating when characters speak to each other like, I have something really important to tell you, and then it immediately cuts to another scene. It's just really, really frustrating, and it doesn't just happen one time. It happens multiple times. There's even this scene where Clay suddenly suggested that Ani was a killer, but there was no follow-up on that. There was no consequence to that. It just happened. And then there's a character death scene that is shown off screen for no reason, and we have Monty's character. Apparently the show is trying to make us sympathize Monty now. Really? Are you kidding me? With his homophobic father and his sad ending. And at the end of the episode, we get 20 minutes of Fast and Furious family dinner type scenes. And they still make no sense or have any conclusion at all whatsoever. So yeah, overall, 13 Reasons Why Season 3, it's a shit show. Quite literally, a shit show. It's a mess. It's, before I even talk about the story, I'm just going to talk about the technical stuff first. The cinematography, it's terrible. It's awful. The color grading on the frames, they're so bad. They're so bland and tasteless. The editing is really choppy and boring. The acting is terrible as well. The dialogues are so unrealistic and so unnatural. The music, while I do appreciate the fact that the musical supervisors of the show are choosing, like post-punk tracks, they're not using these very great tracks in a good way. In fact, they're kind of ruining it, doing them injustice. And then we have the story itself, which is probably the worst thing about this show. First of all, what the hell is with this cafe? This cafe has to appear on every single episode. Like this Monet's cafe where all the characters go for some reason whenever they want to go to another restaurant, but of course the producers of this show don't have the money to afford to build another set, so every time they go to this stupid Monet's cafe and everything happens there, it's really, really dumb. In fact, it kind of reminds me of that stupid cafe in The Flash where it constantly gets destroyed and rebuilt like over and over again. Other than that, the story itself is very incoherent. It constantly jumps back and forth on the timeline, and whenever it jumps back to a flashback, we don't know when is that flashback taking place? In the past 8 months? It can happen anywhere at any time. And when you try to line up all the flashbacks chronologically, it does not make sense whatsoever. And also, why the premise of this show, the premise of this season is already terrible enough. I mean, why are the writers trying to make us sympathize with Bryce and also other terrible characters? And and it's not like Bryce is actually changing or trying to be a good guy anyways, because we have another scene where Bryce and Alex broke into a mansion, and Bryce would threaten a kid with a knife while being in the middle of a redemption arc. And then later on, we have the homecoming game where Bryce would suddenly destroy Zach's life by breaking his knees for no actual good reason. While a few hours ago, he and his mom were doing yoga with some nice family bonding. It just doesn't make sense. The only way to rationalize this is that Bryce had been lying all along. Bryce had been acting all along, and that he was actually never sorry about his actions, and that he still deserved to die. I kind of get what the show is trying to do, what the show is trying to say. You know how everybody has dark secrets and everyone experienced shit. But when the stories are not interesting whatsoever, when the characters are so poorly written and uninteresting, and when every single episode does not have a climax or any structure whatsoever, I really am not invested in the story at all. And the new characters are all very, very lame, especially for Ani. Again, he's just a character created solely for the purpose of explaining everything, and a stupid love triangle storyline that doesn't actually have any consequence whatsoever. And that's basically what happens for a lot of the storylines in this show. They just have no consequence, they have no impact at all. And I guess my final complaint is that for most of the scenes in this show, they are either boring or head scratching or just cringy. And that's really unfortunate. I'm just gonna leave it at that. I've spoken enough already. I will put some other links down in the description of other YouTubers talking about the show. I am giving 13 Reasons Why Season 3 a strong 1 out of 10. A 1. So, have you watched 13 Reasons Why Season 3 from 1 to 10? How much did you rate it? Like if you like it, hate if you hate it, and subscribe if you want more, and thanks for watching.